Hi, this is a video showing you how to do some soldering for your sustainable building once you've already figured out the layout of the wires. So before doing any soldering, you want to check first of all that your wires are long enough. If this is my blueprint that I imagine going on the roof of my building that I built, I want to check that the wires are long enough to get where I need them to get. So for example, if this wire needed to connect from the grid to this first bulb, I would say this is just barely long enough. I wouldn't actually say that this is long enough. I would be much more comfortable using this wire here so that I have a little bit more wire to work with. It's way easier to cut wires shorter if you need them than it is to make them longer. You can't make them longer. So I would say give yourself some generous wire length. So I'm going to use this LED there. Next thing, you want to actually check your whole circuit. Try building your whole circuit together and test it with the battery pack. Remember, LEDs will only work in one direction. So especially if you have two LEDs on one path, if even one of them is in the opposite direction, then neither of them will work. So you want to test that your LEDs are lighting up in the way that you expect by using a battery pack. Lastly, you want to actually make connections in sort of the way that I've done here. If you can see that, I've twisted the wires together so that I can solder them easily. Let me show you how that works when I've got a new wire. So I've got this wire here, it's stripped. I'm going to actually hold these against each other, and I'm going to take my two fingers and twist them. They don't have to be super tight. In fact, it's probably better if they're a little loose. The only thing that's important is that they stay together so that I can solder them easily. So now that I've done this checklist, I'm going to go ahead and think about what's going to happen during the actual soldering. So I want to check first of all that I have a fan on and that my window or door is open. I'm not using a fan right now because of the noise, but you will need to make sure you're using a fan. This next part is really super important. That's the most important part of doing good soldering. You're not trying to melt the solder against the soldering iron. You're trying to melt the solder against the wires. Here's what I mean by that. If I take this solder and I hold it against the hot soldering iron, it will definitely melt it if I hold it there for long enough. But that's not going to be an effective way to make a useful soldering joint. Instead, I need to actually hold the soldering iron against the wires like I'm doing here. And then once I've heated up the wires, I need to bring the straight solder up to join that joint. So I'm trying to actually melt the solder against the wires, not against the soldering iron only. Let me try to do that. I'm going to bring this in. To try to melt it against those wires. And then after it looks good, I will remove the soldering iron and pull it away. Let me show you really close what it looks like when you've got this right. So notice, it's hard to get in focus there. There we go. Notice this looks like one big glob. It's hard to even tell that where are you? There we go. It's hard to even tell that the two wires are separate from each other. There's one big glob here of solder.